A full week of debate in the court of public opinion, and then a full night of discussion in the chambers of City Council. People lined up and signed up to have their voices heard about what should be done with Jacksonville's Confederate monuments.
You are the leaders of Jacksonville, Florida, and we expect a change.
Jacksonville should be a leader and not a follower. All of our monuments should stay right where they are.
They should be taken down, melted, cut up. 77% of the people said, let the monument stay.
Our panel looks at the continuing conversation and what could be ahead on This Week in Jacksonville. And thanks for joining us. The removal of Confederate landmarks, that's a hot debate all over America, not just in Jacksonville. Some say they're painful reminders of slavery, while others say removing statues and monuments cancels out key chapters of U.S. history. So this morning, we're looking at which landmarks here in Jacksonville could be targeted. It sits right in the middle of Hemming Park, serving as a memorial to military members from Florida during the Civil War. This monument has been at the center of the recent debate. It does not stand alone in Jacksonville when it comes to what may be impacted by the council president's request to inventory the memorials, monuments, and markers in public areas. At Confederate Park, another large monument to the women of the Confederacy is on display. On top of that statue is a young woman holding a half-furled Confederate flag. More than 250 Confederate veterans are buried at Old City Cemetery, but it's unclear whether this or the markers and memorials at Camp Captain Mooney Cemetery on the west side or Yellow Bluff Fort on New Berlin Road would be impacted. Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry is addressing what's becoming a controversial debate in this potential removal of the Confederate monuments. We asked him this week whether the monument should remain here in Jacksonville.
As soon as the incident happened, I reject white supremacist, racism in any form. It has no place in Jacksonville. You know, the city council is the legislative branch, and I've always said that I respect their role and their right to have their own priorities. And the council president has said the inventory and removal of these monuments is her priority. So I respect that, and they'll have the discussion and the debate. They'll decide when to move with the legislation, and if it ends up on my desk, I'll evaluate it at that time.
During a city council meeting this week, passionate speakers voiced differing opinions about what to do with the monuments on city property. Council President Ana Lopez-Brochet has requested an inventory of such monuments so she could possibly file legislation in council to have them removed. All right, joining us this morning, a couple local journalists with statewide followings. A.G. Gankarski writes for FloridaPolitics.com and Folio Weekly. Also with us, Ed Dean, radio talk show host, appearing in the Morning Drive on WBOB, and again, statewide following. I appreciate the chance just to hear from you. Obviously, you gentlemen, like me, you're out talking to not just the people involved, but the people who are concerned about these issues. So let's start here. What's the reaction to having the conversation about Confederate monuments in Jacksonville when you hear from callers, Ed, or you're talking with people at council? Ed?
It's like 90-10. The majority of those out there, even of those in the black community that have called into this radio show, say, this doesn't affect our back pocket. This doesn't affect jobs. Why is this on the radar? And in fact, there has been no legislation even on the map. I mean, Tuesday night, you had people like Matt Schellenberg, who rather talk about term limits, got drowned out by 100-1 about the issue of removing Confederate monuments. If the issue goes down to moving them into a museum, and that is on the ballot, or let's say that that's on the issue and it's going to happen, I think a lot of people can get behind that. A lot of people don't think that's going to happen.
Well, not sure where it's going yet because there's nothing that is legislatively pushed forward yet. A.G., what are you hearing?
Yeah, I think Schellenberg would be better off letting them talk about monuments rather than his term limits bill, for one thing. But, you know, there's not a lot of enthusiasm on the council for actually pushing this bill through. I mean, there's a reason it hasn't been filed yet, and there's really not anybody who's going to carry it. Ana Brochet has been walking it back. You know, she did a press release 2 weeks ago saying she wanted to remove the monuments, but by the end of last week, she basically abandoned that position. So it leaves the question open of who's going to carry the bill. I'm hearing that an African-American Democrat may end up carrying the bill, and it may get through committees, but if it gets to the floor of the council, you know what's going to happen. Floor amendments, a lot of sandbagging, a lot of kneecapping, because Mayor Lenny Curry does not want this bill to go through.
Well, so Mayor Curry is not saying that publicly, at least. He's saying, okay, my priorities are still over here, and I'm still focusing on them, so I'll essentially, I think he's saying I'll deal with it if it comes to council.
Yes.
Is there something out of sorts here with the council president as you put it, getting out in front of this?
Well, I think she's being too reactive, and if you want to be proactive, that's one argument. But we do not have Charlottesville all over the map. We don't have them in St. Augustine the other evening where you guys reported peaceful protest. The same thing in Hemming Park. We don't have, as we say, Mississippi burnings happening left and right. We have jobs coming in. Amazon's talking about 4,000 jobs, UPS at 1,500, IKEA at 500, Baptist Health. Jacksonville's on the map for jobs. Now we're on the map where, if we don't pass, say, some sort of bill that does something with monuments, we might either be boycotted, or now we might be on the map where, say, Jacksonville might be a pro-friendly place because of Confederate monuments. That's the kind of area I don't think Jacksonville wants to be put on the map.
Right. Well, and the mayor certainly it seems to feel that way. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's at least what we're getting from him.
Mayor's concern is public safety.
Yeah.
And the mayor has spoken numerous times about hearing chatter from outside groups that would come in to influence this debate. And you're seeing it on both sides. Obviously, there's the Confederate monument people on the right, but on the left, you're seeing Black Lives Matter and Antifa and these other groups. And the longer this goes on, the more chance there's going to be, a conflagration between these people, because, the extremists are going to pull the debate. And ultimately, if the extremists are pulling the debate, they'll define the debate. They'll be the ones that we'll be quoting and talking to. And the people in the middle, who are more or less not that interested in either way, are going to be left out of the discussion.
Well, I do want to point out, so not everyone arrived at City Council this week predisposed to one side or the other. I want you to hear from a woman who was there and spoke with us. She said she was really focused on just the importance of having a conversation about the issue.
I'm actually a history major in college, and I think it's really important for public history to be discussed in a forum such as this. I think a lot of times we take history for granted, and so the fact that this issue it's frustrating sometimes because people have such heated opinions about it, but people are passionate about history, and so I think it's really important that this is a conversation that we're having right now.
So that's the element I kind of want to focus on here, AG, and then Ed, I want to hear from you. Isn't it important to have the conversation? What's wrong with, in this case, the city council president, but what's wrong with somebody in local government saying, hey, let's at least discuss this because it has become a national issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can discuss it, you can contextualize, you can do what they're doing in Charleston and put up signs explaining what the monuments are about. But, Jacksonville history is about more than a Confederacy. And if we reduce Jacksonville history to Confederacy, to that 4-year period and the aftermath, then it opens up a lot of questions like, for the people who oppose the monuments, why are the monuments even there? What are they memorializing? They say it's white supremacy. They point out that the monuments were put up during Jim Crow type eras, not just in Jacksonville, but across the country. And, so if we're having that discussion, it opens up a lot of other discussions. It's not just monuments.
Right.
It's about, the entire power structure of not just the city, but the country itself.
Ed, that question to you, isn't it a good idea to have these conversations instead of just kind of ignoring it and saying, well, that's other places in the country we don't want to talk about?
Here's a conversation. This conversation has been around for the last several years. Why now? Why not back then? Also, where does Anna Brochet, and she had even admitted that, okay, this is kind of phase one. I don't know where this is going. Yeah. Where do you put the brakes on? Do you get rid of now if schools named after Jeb Stuart, Robert E. Lee, anything with the last name Lee? Do you get rid of Old Dixie Highway? What about St. Augustine? Hello, on some of that as well. Where do you put the brakes on? I think some of this, with all due respect, is manufactured. For those out there, it doesn't seem, they've got the HRO, pension reform. I don't know, maybe there's a quietness on the left that they can't seem to get some of their conversations out there. If you want to make this political, why now? Why such an outrage? What does this have to do with jobs coming in? How is this going to pertain to your back pocket? Look at changing the name of the school that they did a few years ago. And the school, as of right now, is still a D-rated school. Changing the name does not affect all of this. That's a discussion I think should take place about history. Maybe a museum, have those of the Underground Railroad, those that are slave owners, those that were slave, Union, Southerners, want to abide and conversate with all that together, mix it in. That would be a fair conversation.
Here's the thing, Ed, though. This is the thing. When you look at these schools and you look at these edifices, they were named during Jim Crow eras. You look at the mid-century stuff that was named, all those dedications were intended to reinforce a particular social order. That social order had white people on top, African Americans on the bottom. If that's a conversation that, people want to have, great, we can have that conversation. And if you want to take that conversation and extend it to present day, you look at things like mass incarceration. You look at things like, inadequate educational outcomes, inadequate socioeconomic outcomes. You talk about jobs many times, but here's the thing about jobs. They're not getting everywhere in the community. Those jobs are getting to some people, but if you go to Northwest Jacks, North Side, other areas, it's like 1968 over there. It's like consolidation never happened. And that's the Confederate legacy that many people are objecting to.
But Amazon.com just said we're going to open up in the urban areas, and that's where a lot of those applicants happen. Remember, Charles Barkley.
Changed the jobs component there.
Charles Barkley said, no one's paying attention to this. If we didn't know there was a monument there, our goal is to implement those of a better society in the black communities. You've got problems in the north side with crime and everything else, and they're telling me they're taking down a monument. By the way, I like putting them in the museums. I think there's a good conversation there.
Which museum do you want it in?
Yeah. We have existing buildings. We can do that.
Well, might have to build one. But so let's keep talking about this. We're going to take a pause here and then come right back. So stay with us here. Hey, as we do that, an important part of what we've been talking about this summer is the application process for becoming a U.S. citizen. So it involves passing a civics test, and that covers a lot of U.S. history and government topics. So there are 100 civics questions on that naturalization test. How would you do? Here's just one of the questions on there. My guests right here, they'd nail it, I'm sure. But how do you do this? Who is one of your U.S. senators in your state? And then the U.S. House of Representatives, how many voting members are there? I'm going to answer those couple of questions for you. You're playing along at home, right? Answer in just a few minutes, so stay with us on This Week in Jacksonville.
You each drive a Ford pickup, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you a next-generation pickup.
Awesome. Let's do this.
The bed is made of high-strength steel, which is less susceptible to punctures than aluminum.
The stronger, the better.
And best of all, this new truck is actually the current Chevy Silverado.
It's the Chevy Summer Drive. Current Chevy owners and lessees get a total value over $11,000 or get 0% financing for 60 months on this Silverado All-Star. See your Southern Chevy dealers.
It's the flooring sale you've been waiting for. Empire Today's half-price sale. Get $2,400 of flooring for $1,200, $5,200 for an amazing $2,600. That's half the price of your entire purchase. Shop for carpet, hardwood, tile, vinyl, and laminate right from home and have it professionally installed. Don't miss Empire's half-price sale. Schedule now.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
You were so right about that sale at America's Best.
Designer frames?
2 pairs from Karen Millen and Sofia Vergara. It's a great deal. 2 pairs and a free eye exam starting at $69.95.
You just pick them up?
Well, I did stop for coffee first.
Bet you stopped for coffee after, too, didn't you?
Ah! So cute!
Wow. You realize owls have sensitive hearing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ah! So cute!
The designer sales event, it's not just a better deal, it's America's Best. Hurry, designer sale ends soon.
On September 16th, thousands of walkers will gather at Metropolitan Park for the First Coast Heart Walk. You'll see heart disease survivors, families, and supporters of the American Heart Association's fight against heart disease and stroke. Channel 4 is a proud sponsor, and we invite you to join us.
Nissan is the premier partner of the Heisman Trophy, and we surprised fans with this award-winning lineup.
Herschel Walker, Are you guys ready to go train with us? All right, let's go do it.
Then, here we go. They experienced Nissan's award-winning lineup.
Wow. See why they call it the Titan.
It's Nissan's bottom line model year-end event. Get 0% for 72 months on 12 models, or save up to $10,760 on Titan XT.
I'd love to own a Titan.
Safety alert. Can you spot the child drowning here?
What you picture from like a movie scene, not what happens at all.
Florida, leading the nation in drowning deaths. Easily missed from just feet away.
They just kind of slip under with no noise.
News 4 Jax uncovered an extra line of defense. The new technology that could turn your phone into a lifesaver. Tuesday at 5 on News 4 Jax.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And A.G. Gankowski and Ed Dean with us. I spoke recently with Governor Rick Scott. He was in town for an event here. And we talked to him about Confederate monuments while he was here. We also heard from him that's saying that when it comes to Tallahassee, he thinks proposals to remove a Confederate soldier monument from the Capitol grounds, he says, hey, that should be handled through the legislature. And that's where the controversial issue could be discussed early next year. So guests here at the table, Is that something that the state lawmakers need to look at, just like the local municipal leaders are looking at here in Jacksonville?
Well, I know Debbie Wasserman Schultz, former chair of the DNC, South Florida Congresswoman from West Palm, is out there with other Democrats saying we need to have a special session. Again, it's not about health care, not about jobs, it's not even education, it's about Confederate monuments. Have the argument, that's fine. I think it needs to be left to local municipalities. That's the way it should be. And I will say this about Governor Rick Scott. He's kind of stayed away from it, taken a low profile, and I think that has benefited him. Even though he does have an association with Trump, he hasn't been caught, as some would say, in that media trap.
Yeah, but you would think that someone in his position is probably trying to walk that line and make sure they don't get caught up in that. Special session?
There's not going to be a special session on this. The Democrats have no power in Tallahassee. In the House, they're outnumbered 2-1. You've got a certain number of Democrats like Kim Daniels who are basically Republicans. The Senate, you know, they're down 25-15 or whatever the number is. But there's no political momentum for Democrats. So any issue like this is a saber rattling. It helps with the fundraising. It's not going to affect anything in policy.
Yeah, so one of the big talkers this week was about the sportscaster with ESPN, Robert Lee, and he got moved from the game in Virginia there. What have you heard from folks? And I've heard some of the people on air with you talking about that.
I mean, they had 4 press releases in one day. It's William and Mary, no offense to University of Virginia, William and Mary, for crying out loud. You've got Alabama and what, Florida State, or you got other colleges out there. That's the game they're watching. And for ESPN to think that somehow somebody's going to be insensitive or outraged because a guy's named Robert Lee, oh, by the way, when they show him on camera, he's an Asian American, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Have you heard the "you got to be kidding me" side?
Yeah, I mean, this is the only way that we're talking about University of Virginia football. So,
That's right.
I mean, Robert Lee, you know, ESPN handled it as badly as they could have, but they ironically got publicity they otherwise wouldn't have gotten for a meaningless Saturday afternoon game.
Well, so a point here. I appreciate the time, and we talked about kind of one issue. There are lots of other things going on in state politics, local politics, so let's do this again when we can talk about more than one thing. What do you think?
Had a good time. Thank you.
Ed, AG, thank you so much. All right, I want to give you the answer to that citizens quiz we were just talking about. Who is one of your U.S. senators? Well, in Florida, you can choose either Bill Nelson or Marco Rubio. In Georgia, choose either Johnny Isakson or David Perdue. And U.S. House of Representatives, how many voting members? The answer is 435, and it's been that way more than 100 years since 1912. All right, we're switching the focus in just a moment. We're going to have a chance to meet one of the leading Republicans running for Attorney General in the state. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You work hard, and you deserve to sleep even harder. So this Friday through Sunday, Mattress Firm is having a flash sale with incredible Labor Day savings. Get a free adjustable base with select purchases, only during Mattress Firm's Labor Day flash sale.
Right here, Dad.
The Infiniti QX60. Impressive performance and seating for 7. Lease the Infiniti QX60 for $399 a month. Visit your local Infiniti retailer.
UM is short for under or uninsured motorist coverage, and you need to look at your insurance policy to make sure that you have UM coverage, because it's the only thing that's going to protect you if you're hit by someone who doesn't have any insurance or has very little.
It's bow time at Bojangles. We marinate our chicken for 12 hours, which is about how long you can last till you gotta get some more.
Get 8 pieces of our perfectly seasoned chicken for $11.99 and 4 biscuits absolutely free.
Bojangles, it's bow time.
Nissan is the premier partner of the Heisman Trophy, and we surprised fans with this award-winning lineup.
Eddie George, Marcus Allen, Desmond Howard.
All right, are you guys ready to go train with us? All right, let's go do it.
Then, they experienced Nissan's award-winning lineup.
No blind spots.
Not just a feature I could do.
It's Nissan's bottom line model year-end event. Save up to $2,500 on Sentra, or save up to $10,760 on select models.
Will you take me to the Nissan dealership?
Thanks for staying with us on This Week in Jacksonville. This segment, we're talking with Ashley Moody, who is a candidate for Attorney General in the state of Florida. We know that there's one other Republican candidate announced so far, Jacksonville's Jay Fant. So, Ashley Moody, we wanted to get to know you a little bit.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really glad, too. You've got some Jacksonville ties. You're in town to talk to some groups or some people here in Jacksonville. Tell me why you're running, and then I want to hear more about your background.
Well, great. Well, I'm running because I think I can make a difference in the state of Florida. I started my law practice with the law firm of Holland & Knight doing commercial litigation defense, and wanted to get in the courtroom more, and got hired on by a great U.S. attorney at the time, Paul Perez, a Jacksonville man, and still working here in Jacksonville as a lawyer. And he hired me on to move to Jacksonville and begin as a federal prosecutor. So I was grateful he took a chance on a Tampa lawyer and moved me up here. So I actually lived in Jacksonville for a couple of years as a federal prosecutor. I was able to prosecute cases involving guns, drugs, fraud. It was a great experience, and I was proud of the work that I accomplished here.
Why was that interesting? Why was that something that you really wanted to do on the federal prosecution side, where you're talking drug cases, gun cases?
Certainly. Well, anytime you can have a hand in protecting citizens, representing the United States of America, it was just something that I'll never forget. It was an honor, and I hope I did a good job.
So when we're talking about some of your background, you took your law degree and some early practice Holland & Knight, and then as a federal prosecutor, then took it to the step you ran for judge in Hillsborough County, right?
Correct. So Hillsborough County is a one-county circuit, 13th Judicial Circuit. I ran for judge at 31. At the time when I was elected, I was the youngest judge in Florida. No longer, by the time I resigned from the bench. I had been on the bench over a decade, so I had lost that title. But proud to say once was the youngest judge in Florida, and loved being a judge. Felt very proud to serve in that capacity, knowing that the difficult decisions I made on a daily basis aided in the stability of our county and our circuit.
How would you describe what the Attorney General is responsible for? Because you said you're running because you want to make a difference. Well, what would being Attorney General do to make a difference for the state of Florida?
You know, it's funny, as I've traveled around the state meeting voters, a lot of people ask me what the Attorney General does, and I ask them, have you voted for Attorney General before? To which they acknowledge, yes, they've voted for Attorney General, but they still don't know what the Attorney General does. The Attorney General has a hand in so many matters. It's a very broad position. They handle all the appellate cases on behalf of the state of Florida. They give opinions when asked to do so by certain statutorily allowed officers that may ask for those opinions. They protect consumers. There's a consumer protection division. They oversee statewide prosecution, which involves multi-jurisdictional prosecutions. All of these areas I've touched upon in my legal career, and I think that's what I bring to this race, is a depth of experience that I can hit the ground running on day one and truly make a positive impact over my tenure as Attorney General.
There's that component that you're part of the cabinet for the state leadership as Attorney General. What do you bring in that realm? Because there are only a few people, in addition to the governor, who serve as part of the cabinet.
Well, you know, certainly if you examine my work history, my professional history, I have had interactions on multi-levels of our government, and interactions with numerous individuals from all walks of life, socioeconomic status, different stages of life, and I think I bring that perspective to the cabinet and good decision-making skills after deliberative process.
It's interesting, one of the things we've seen in the past, the folks who run for the office certainly have a legal background, right? But some state lawmakers, Jay Fant, that we talked about a moment ago, the state representative, you're coming from that judicial perspective and experience, I guess. How is that different? Because it's possible that, say, a Democrat was elected governor, but a Republican, in your case, was elected to this cabinet position, Attorney General. Then how do things work? How would you work, as the lawmakers say, across the party lines or across the aisles? That's not supposed to be relevant to what a judge does, right?
Well, you know, being a judge has given me the experience of, I use the term deliberative process. I have lots of practice at listening to all sides of a story, all sides of an issue, and trying to make the best decision I can for the circumstances in front of me. In the case of being Attorney General, I would make the best decision I could for the people of the state of Florida. So certainly a judge will help, being a judge will help in that regard.
Yeah. All right, so final thing. What was the best part of living in Jacksonville here 10 or 12 years ago when you were here?
I loved living in Jacksonville. I actually tried to live downtown. I was trying to make it a very urban city where you could live, work, play downtown. I actually took the trolley to the courthouse to work. I had some interesting rides and met some interesting people. But that was probably my favorite part of living in Jacksonville, was really trying to enjoy, at the time, the revival or breadth of life in downtown. That was very fun to me.
So here are the confirmed candidates for Attorney General. The Democrat is Ryan Torrance, an attorney who doesn't have any opposition yet. Rod Smith is a potential candidate there, the former state senator who lives in Alachua County. You've met both Republicans now here on our show. Jacksonville's Jay Fant, a state representative, and now Ashley Moody. Honoring the tremendous sacrifice and service of our men and women in the military, Mayor Lenny Curry this week signed a bill establishing an agreement for a POW MIA memorial near Cecil Field. During that signing ceremony you just saw, the mayor thanked Councilman Doyle Carter for sponsoring the bill, but he also talked about his grandfather's experience in the military.
Talked about what he went through with friends, brothers in combat, and those that he lost, how difficult it was when he came back home, difficult even on the family. But then when you talk about MIA and POWs, the uncertainty, the unknown. So again, it's humbling.
A reminder, more than 1,600 servicemen are still missing and otherwise unaccounted for from the Vietnam War. All right, different topic here. Do you remember 25 years ago? Hurricane Andrew demolished Miami-Dade County, the most destructive storm ever to hit the state. In 1992, Andrew caused more than $25 billion in damage in the state. It also claimed 44 lives. Florida's emergency management leadership believes that the state is better prepared now as the legacy of Andrew. Andrew had sustained winds of 165 miles an hour. As of this week, there have been 8 named storms in the Atlantic this year. 2, Franklin and Gert, developed into hurricanes. Tropical storm Emily at the end of July is the only one to directly impact Florida. All right, so This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. We're going to preview the return to Washington of Congress. A former staffer for Senator Mel Martinez and a man who worked in the Bush administration is joining us next week. We're going to host Kevin Doyle and others at that time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and online at news4jax.com.
Now, more than ever before, more people get their news from News 4 Jax, Jacksonville's #1 source for local news.